Now let's be honest, when a new game is announced, there is always a lot of buzz and excitement. So much so that sometimes you might read between the lines just a little too much, or hear a rumour and just run with it. We here at RacingGames pride ourselves on keeping things as factual and as honest as possible, but even we make mistakes when it comes to speculation regarding new games. Gran Turismo 7 has been out now for 2 weeks, and with it comes the realisation that while some of our predictions were pretty much spot on, others were, well... I'm Mark from RacingGames, and today I'm here to hold my hands up and make some admissions. Call this video an addendum if you will, as I go through some of the main features of Gran Turismo 7 and admit that not everything I've said in the past has been accurate. Okay, it's time to grit my teeth and get on with it. Let's start with dynamic weather. This has popped up a couple of times in past videos, where our main speculation was how dynamic weather would work. Well, as it turns out, it is sporadic at best. Dynamic weather has only been implemented on a handful of tracks, with some tracks even having no option to race in either wet or dry conditions. Where it is featured, dynamic weather is awesome. Having a race turn on its head with a sudden downpour is exactly the kind of unpredictability I was referring to. Every track in the game does have dynamic clouds and a day-night transition, but again only a handful have a full 24-hour cycle. This was confirmed by Kazunori Yamauchi himself during Sony's State of Play show just before the game's release, meaning everything I had said previously about dynamic weather was no longer true. As disappointing as this was, I do believe there's a good reason behind all this, which I'll come back to later on. Just like with dynamic weather, I was also slightly off the mark when it came to damage. We reported that a new damage model was incoming, however we crashed into the barriers when it came to predicting just what that actually entailed. As it turns out, cars do have cosmetic damage, but that's about it. This is something that was quite rightly pointed out in the comments of our review video. Crashing at 150 miles per hour should yield more than just a cracked headlight, but in Gran Turismo 7 that's all that happens. In both previous videos, I did explain that this is due to licensing issues, with manufacturers not wanting to see their prized assets smashed to pieces. As frustrating as this is, it is what it is. Gran Turismo 7 is a racing simulator after all, not a crashing simulator. So dynamic weather is ticked off, and damage is a check. There's only one thing left to talk about, and boy, did it make some of you angry. Before we move on, have you subscribed to RacingGames yet? Just one click and you're on the RacingGames grid. Oh, and hit that notification bell too so you never miss an upload. Alright, on with the video. Now before I continue, I do want to make one thing clear. I do not own a PlayStation 5, or even a PlayStation 4. My last foray into the PS family was all the way back in 2007, when I switched on my PS2 for one last time for a few games of FIFA before switching to the Xbox 360. Therefore, I have found it both confusing and hilarious in equal measure to be accused of being a PS5 fanboy and even a gatekeeper for saying that Gran Turismo 7 being cross-gen was a bad thing. Maybe I did focus on the graphical side a little too much, but in my defense, I've been accused in the past of not caring about graphics enough. I mean, my favourite games of all time are OpenTTD and Minecraft, so how do you think I feel about graphics? So my point with Gran Turismo 7 being on the PS4 was not to upset PS4 owners, nor was it to be flippant about the cost of and ability to buy a PS5. No, my point was it doesn't matter how technologically advanced you make your game, if it has to be compatible with 8-year-old hardware, you will always need to make sacrifices. To put my speculation hat back on, this could be why dynamic weather has been limited, and could even be why damage is still limited. Even a PS4 Pro, despite being significantly more powerful than a vanilla PS4, would struggle to render a full race with dynamic weather, a day-night cycle, and a full damage model. So to all you PS4 players out there, I do hope you're enjoying the game. It does run fairly well on the PS4, as our very own Toby D and Martin can attest. I have read some stories of the game bricking people's consoles, but I am taking those with a grain of salt, as without proof it's just hearsay. Our side-by-side comparison video did highlight some differences in the visuals, plus we all know by now about the excessive load times PS4 players are experiencing. But all in all, it's a solid game on both consoles. But before I admit I was fully wrong, I do have one more argument to make. Imagine how many more features Polyphony could have included if the game was solely developed for the PS5. Yes, the game's development cycle started way before the PS5 was announced, so it's likely it was always meant to be a PS4 game and has now been released on the PS5 too. I do believe this is the case. However, I would also find it surprising that Polyphony wouldn't have changed their scope once they knew the PS5 was coming. As it turns out, they have made a very sensible business decision here, but there will come a day where development will stop on PS4 games, and I can't help but think Gran Turismo 7 would have been so much more if it was developed solely for the PS5. Some of you might disagree with me here, and that's totally fine, but again, I am not a PS5 fanboy. I'm just a guy on YouTube who thinks a game has been compromised by being made to work on hardware from 2013. Just from Moore's Law alone, we now have technology 16 times more powerful than it was 8 years ago. Really makes you think, doesn't it? So that's my admission. Sometimes we read too far between the lines, sometimes things get lost in translation, and sometimes developers do overpromise on their games. I just have to mention the name Hello Games and you'll know what I'm talking about. Oh, and as for Cyberpunk 2077, it's the most famous example in recent years of a disastrous launch, nothing more than that. It does prove that a game has to be developed practically twice to fix the errors made the first time around, but I digress. Gran Turismo 7 has had a successful launch on both consoles, and even though I'm predicting future updates might still be PS5 exclusives, I can still say for now I'm glad PS4 players haven't been left out. After all, it's not their fault PS5s are rarer than gold dust, so they shouldn't be punished just for owning the wrong console. I'm Mark from RacingGames, and thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, keep things civil in the comments if you can, and now I'm off to finish my script for why Gran Turismo 7 should be released on the PSP. I mean, why not? It's unfair to leave them out too.